She found a pale, cold baby abandoned in the rain behind her cafe. No heartbeat, glowing red eyes, tiny fangs. She wrapped him in her shawl anyway. What the waitress didn't know, the vampire king had been searching for his missing son for 3 days. And the moment he saw her holding his heir, everything he believed about humans shattered forever. The mountain wind howled like a wounded animal as Clara wiped down the last table of the Pine Ridge Cafe. It was nearly 2 in the morning, and the storm had chased away even the truckers who usually stop for coffee on their way through the pass. She should have been afraid, working alone this late. But fear was a luxury Clara couldn't afford, not when the tips from the graveyard shift paid for her grandmother's medicine. The lights flickered.
Once. Twice.
Then she heard it. A sound so faint she almost missed it beneath the thunder, a thin, desperate cry that didn't quite sound human. Clara froze, her hand still clutching the dish rag. The cry came again, sharper this time, from somewhere behind the building. Every instinct screamed at her to lock the door and call the police. Mountain lions, sometimes, wandered down from the peaks. Or worse, the missing persons reports had been piling up lately, bodies drained of blood, throats torn open. The town called them animal attacks. But the way people whispered in the cafe, the way they locked their doors before sunset, they knew better. The cry pierced the night again. Clara grabbed the flashlight from under the counter and pushed through the back door. Rain lashed her face immediately, soaking through her thin uniform. She swept the beam across the alley, past the dumpster, toward the line of trash bins.
There.
A bundle of cloth, wedged between 2 metal containers, shaking in the downpour. Clara's heart hammered as she approached. Please don't be what I think it is. Please don't be. She pulled back the soaked fabric. A baby. No more than 3 months old, naked except for the tattered blanket wrapped loosely around its tiny body. But this was no ordinary infant. Its skin was marble pale, almost translucent in the flashlight's beam. Veins traced delicate blue patterns across its chest. And its eyes, when they fluttered open, glowed faintly red, like dying embers in a fireplace. Clara gasped and stumbled backward. The baby's mouth opened in another cry, revealing 2 small, sharp points where canines should be. Run, her mind screamed. Run now. But her body wouldn't obey. Because beneath the impossible features, beneath the supernatural horror of what she was seeing, there was only one truth that mattered. This was a child. Abandoned.
Dying.
The baby's skin felt like touching a block of ice when Clara lifted it. Its chest barely moved with each breath. Those red eyes stared up at her with something that looked heartbreakingly like hope. Oh, sweetheart, Clara whispered, wrapping the infant in her wool shawl, the one her grandmother had knitted, the only warm thing she owned. What happened to you? She carried the baby inside, kicking the door shut against the storm. The cafe's warmth enveloped them both, but the child's temperature didn't change. Still cold. Still wrong. Clara tried milk first, warm to body temperature. The baby turned its head away, whimpering. She tried water. Sugar water. Even a bit of broth from the kitchen. Nothing. The infant grew weaker in her arms, its cries becoming softer, more desperate. Clara's hands shook as she rocked it, searching frantically through her phone for answers she knew she wouldn't find. What did vampire babies eat? Did they even exist? Of course they exist, she thought grimly, staring at the proof in her arms. The question is, why is one dying in my cafe? The baby's eyes began to close. No, 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 stay with me, little one. Please, panic clawed at Clara's throat. She was watching this child die, and there was nothing she could do. In desperation, she began to hum. It was an old melody, something her grandmother used to sing when Clara was small and frightened. She didn't remember the words anymore, only the tune, sad and sweet and ancient, like it came from a time before electric lights and modern fears. The baby's eyes opened. Its tiny fist curled around Clara's finger with surprising strength. The whimpering stopped. Oh, thank God, Clara breathed, tears streaming down her face. She kept humming, swaying gently, and the infant settled against her chest. Its breathing grew steadier.
Stronger.
She looked down at the child's wrist and saw a mark she'd missed before. A symbol that looked like a crown merged with a crescent moon, crimson against the pale skin. It seemed to pulse with its own inner light. This wasn't just any vampire child. This was someone important, someone powerful, and someone had tried to kill it. Clara glanced at the cafe's windows, suddenly aware of how exposed she was. The storm raged outside, turning the glass into sheets of flowing darkness. Anything could be out there.
Anyone.
Whoever had abandoned this baby might come back to finish the job. I won't let them, Clara whispered to the sleeping infant. I don't know what you are or where you came from, but you're safe now. I promise. She locked every door and pulled the shades. Then she settled into the corner booth, the one where she could see both entrances, and held the baby close. The child felt slightly warmer now, its breathing deep and even. Clara kept humming through the night, watching the darkness beyond the windows, waiting for dawn. She didn't know that 5 miles away, in the ruins of a burned castle, a vampire king was tearing apart what remained of his kingdom, searching for his missing son. She didn't know that the lullaby she hummed was a royal melody, sung only by the vampire queens of old. And she didn't know that by saving this child, she had just rewritten the fate of 2 species. The storm raged on. In Clara's arms, the baby vampire slept peacefully for the first time in 3 days. Outside, something ancient and powerful caught the scent of the royal bloodline on the wind and turned toward the Pine Ridge Cafe. The storm hadn't stopped when Clara finally saw headlights cut through the rain-streaked windows. It was nearly 7 in the evening. She'd stayed at the cafe all day, afraid to take the baby outside, afraid to let it out of her sight. The few customers who'd wandered and had been easy to avoid, she'd kept the infant hidden in the back office, wrapped in her shawl, humming softly whenever it stirred. Now the dinner rush should have started, but the storm had kept everyone away. Until him. The man who entered the cafe moved like a shadow given form. His black cloak dripped rainwater onto the worn linoleum, and when he pushed back his hood, Clara's breath caught in her throat. He was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at, sharp cheekbones, pale skin, dark hair that fell past his shoulders. But his eyes were what made her grip the counter's edge. They were the color of fresh blood, scanning the empty cafe with predatory focus.
We're
open, Clara managed, her voice barely steady. Take any seat. The stranger didn't move. He stood in the doorway, rain hammering the roof above him, his gaze locked on Clara with an intensity that made her skin prickle. You're alone, he said. It wasn't a question. His voice was deep, ancient, carrying the weight of centuries in 2 simple words. My cook called in sick. Storms keeping folks home, Clara forced herself to move, to act normal, to pretend her heart wasn't racing. What can I get you? I'm looking for something. He stepped inside, and Clara noticed he cast no reflection in the chrome napkin dispenser on the counter. Someone actually. Have you seen anything unusual? Perhaps a child. Clara's blood turned to ice. He knows. Oh God, he knows. Just me and the storm, she said, reaching for a menu with trembling hands. Coffee? We've got fresh pie. Thunder cracked overhead, and from the back office came a sound that shattered the lie. A baby's cry. The stranger's entire body went rigid. His eyes blazed brighter, and in one fluid movement, he crossed the cafe, impossibly fast, his hand slamming against the office door before Clara could even scream.
No.
Please. She threw herself between him and the door. Don't hurt him. The man, the vampire, stared down at her. Up close, she could see the fury in his face, the barely contained violence trembling through his frame. He could kill her without effort. Snap her neck like a twig. Move aside, human. No, Clara's voice shook. But she didn't budge. You'll have to go through me. Something flickered in those blood-red eyes. Surprise, maybe. Or curiosity. Then the baby cried again, and Clara watched the vampire's expression transform. The rage melted into something raw and desperate, a grief so profound it seemed to age him 1,000 years in a single moment. That sound, he whispered. I know that cry. Clara's mind raced. This wasn't someone trying to finish what they'd started. This was... You're looking for him, she breathed.
You're
his father? The vampire's gaze snapped back to her, searching, analyzing. Where did you find him? Behind the cafe. Last night. He was dying. The office door burst open. Clara had left it unlocked. The vampire moved past her in a blur, and she chased after him, terrified of what he might do. But he'd stopped in the middle of the small room, frozen like a statue. The baby lay in a makeshift bed of folded aprons and tablecloths, wrapped in Clara's shawl. And Clara, in her exhaustion and worry, had been humming that same lullaby again while she'd worked, not realizing the tune still hung in the air like a ghost. The vampire dropped his knees. That song, he said hoarsely. How do you know that song? I don't know. My grandmother taught me. It helps him sleep. My queen sang that song. His hands shook as he reached for the baby. Every night, she sang it to our son. She died 3 months ago, and I thought his voice broke. I thought I'd lost him too. He lifted the infant with a gentleness that contradicted everything Clara knew about vampires. The baby stirred, opened those glowing red eyes, and something impossible happened. The child smiled. Then immediately began to cry, reaching tiny fists toward Clara. The vampire's face darkened. What have you done to him? Nothing. I kept him warm, I hummed to him. He should know his own father. The vampire tried to soothe the baby, but the cries grew louder, more desperate. I am Lucien Draviker, king of the night court. This is my son, my heir. He should. The baby wailed, back arching, refusing comfort. Lucien's eyes found Clara's, and in them she saw a war raging, pride against desperation, fury against heartbreak. Hold him, he said finally, the words seeming to cost him everything. Please. Clara took the baby, and instantly the cries stopped. The infant nuzzled against her chest, making soft, content sounds. Lucien stared at them both, something dangerous and broken shifting behind his eyes. Explain to me, human, he said softly. Why my son, the crown prince of vampires, heir to a bloodline that stretches back 3,000 years, refuses his own father's touch but clings to a mortal waitress like she's his mother. Clara met his gaze, the baby warm in her arms. Maybe, she whispered, he just knows who saved his life. Thunder rolled overhead, and in the silence that followed, the fragile peace between them trembled like a candle flame in the dark. Lucien's hand shot out and grabbed Clara's wrist before she could blink. His grip was iron cold, crushing. She gasped in pain, but didn't drop the baby. Saved his life. His voice was velvet wrapped around steel. Or stole it. He yanked her arm toward him, turning it over. His other hand moved with surgical precision, pushing back her sleeve to reveal. Nothing.
No marks. No symbols.
No signs of dark magic. The vampire's eyes narrowed. Show me the child's wrist. Clara's heart hammered. Why?
Now.
She carefully shifted the baby, exposing the tiny wrist where the crown and moon symbol pulsed with crimson light. Lucien released her and stepped back, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. The royal seal. The mark of my bloodline, his gaze cut to Clara like a blade. Only someone who knew exactly what they were looking for would recognize that mark. Only someone involved in the attack. Attack? What attack? I found him in the rain. Liar, Lucien's fangs extended, gleaming in the dim light. 3 nights ago, rebel vampires burned my castle's nursery. They slaughtered 6 guards and vanished with my son. And now a human, a mortal who just happens to know the queen's lullaby, who just happens to find the crown prince, expects me to believe this is coincidence. He moved closer, and Clara backed against the wall, clutching the baby tighter. The rebels wanted to murder my heir and end my bloodline, Lucien continued, his voice dropping to a whisper more terrifying than any shout. But perhaps they had a better plan. Perhaps they gave him to a human accomplice. Someone innocent-looking. Someone who could hide him in plain sight until... I don't know anything about rebels or bloodlines. Clara's voice cracked. I'm a waitress. I work double shifts to pay for my grandmother's heart medication. I found a dying baby in the trash, and I wouldn't just leave him there. Then how do you know the lullaby? Lucien's eyes blazed. That song hasn't been sung outside the royal family in 200 years. My queen learned it from her mother, who learned it from hers. It's passed down through blood and memory. So tell me, human, who taught you? Clara's mind raced. My grandmother. She used to sing it when I was little. She said her mother taught her, and her grandmother before that. She said it came from the old country. What old country? I don't know. Romania, maybe? Transylvania? She never said exactly. Tears streamed down Clara's face now. Please, I'm telling the truth. I don't know about any attack. I just found him, and he was so cold, so weak. The baby suddenly stirred, making a soft cooing sound. Its tiny hand reached up and touched Clara's face, right where a tear had fallen. Lucien went completely still. The infant turned its head toward its father, those red eyes focusing for the first time with real awareness. It looked between them, Clara and Lucien, and its lower lip trembled. Then it did something that changed everything. The baby's tiny fingers wrapped around Clara's thumb and refused to let go. It pressed itself against her chest, making a sound that was almost like purring, and buried its face in her shoulder. Choosing her. Lucien's expression cracked. The rage drained away, replaced by something far more painful, a father's rejection, a king's humiliation, a man's utter bewilderment. He won't leave you, Lucien said hoarsely. My own son, my blood, and he clings to a stranger. Clara saw the vampire's hand shake before he clenched it into a fist. She saw the ancient grief in his eyes, the terrible loneliness of someone who'd lost everything and just found it again, only to discover it no longer recognized him. He's just scared, Clara whispered. He doesn't understand. You've been gone. 3 days, Lucien's voice was hollow. I've searched for 3 days. Tore apart every rebel hideout within 50 miles. Killed anyone who might have information. And he was here, 5 miles from the ruins of my castle. With you. He looked at Clara, then really looked at her. Saw the exhaustion in her face, the stains on her uniform, the way she held his son with practiced gentleness. Saw the shawl she'd wrapped him in, worn and old, but clean and warm. You truly didn't know, he said finally. It wasn't a question anymore. Clara shook her head, still crying. I swear it. I just wanted to help him. Lucien closed his eyes. When he opened them again, some of the violence had faded, replaced by a cold calculation that was somehow worse. Then you're a fool, he said quietly. Because now you're in danger. The rebels know the royal seal would lead me to my son. They'll expect me to find him. And when they discover a human has been caring for him, he moved to the window, pulling back the curtain to stare into the storm. They'll come for you both. Then take him. Clara held out the baby, even though her heart screamed in protest. Take him somewhere safe. Lucien looked at his son, at the way the infant immediately began to cry at the suggestion, tiny hands clutching Clara's uniform. He won't survive it, the vampire said softly. Whatever you've done, whatever bond you've created, he needs you now. His jaw tightened. Which means, human, that whether I trust you or not, I have no choice but to keep you alive. Outside, lightning split the sky. And in the darkness between thunder, neither of them heard the messenger raven take flight, carrying news to the vampire court. The king has found his heir, in the arms of a human woman. The vampire court received the news at midnight. Commander Varric read the message twice, his scarred face twisting with disgust. Beside him, Lady Selene, elegant and lethal in her crimson gown, laughed without humor. "A human," she said, her voice dripping venom. "Our crown prince, the heir to 3 millennia of pure bloodline, clings to a human waitress like she birthed him herself." They stood in what remained of the castle's great hall, surrounded by other nobles whose faces reflected the same outrage. The rebel attack had destroyed much, but the court's pride had survived intact, and now that pride burned hotter than the fires that had consumed the nursery. "It's an insult," growled Lord Theron, his clawed hand crushing the marble armrest of his chair. "The king dishonors us all by allowing this mortal to touch the royal heir." Varric's eyes glowed in the darkness. "It's worse than an insult. It's a threat." He held up the message. "The king has taken them both to the old monastery outside the city. He means to protect her." "Protect a human?" Selene's laugh turned sharp. "While our kind, purebloods who've served his family for centuries, are branded as potential traitors and kept at arm's length?" She turned to face the assembled nobles. "Tell me, does this sound like the action of a rational king?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "She's bewitched the child," Theron declared. "Use some human magic, some dark spell. How else could the prince reject his own father?" "Witchcraft," another vampire hissed. "It's the only explanation." Varric let the accusations build, watching the court work itself into fury. Then he raised his hand for silence. "The question," he said carefully, "is what we do about it. Our king is compromised, grief-stricken over the queen's death, desperate to save his son. He's not thinking clearly." He paused, letting the implications sink in. "Perhaps he needs our help to see the truth." Selene smiled, showing all her teeth. "You mean the human must be eliminated before she corrupts the heir further?" "I mean," Varric said coldly, "that the child must be freed from her influence. If she dies in the process," he shrugged. "What is one human life against the purity of our royal bloodline?" The vote was unanimous. At the monastery, Clara paced the cold stone floor while Lucien stood motionless by the window. They'd arrived an hour ago, the vampire moving so fast through the storm that Clara had barely processed the journey. One moment she was in her cafe, the next she was in this ancient building that smelled of dust and forgotten prayers. The baby slept in her arms, finally peaceful after the chaos of the night. "Your people won't like this," Clara said quietly. "Me being here with him?" "My people," Lucien replied without turning, "will do as I command." But there was something in his voice, a tension, a doubt, that made Clara's stomach clench. "You don't believe that?" He turned then, and she saw the truth in his face. "The court has been unstable since my queen died. The rebel attack wasn't random. Someone inside my own castle gave them information. Timing. Guards' positions," his hands curled into fists. "I have a traitor in my ranks, and until I find them, I trust no one." "Then why leave us here alone?" "You're not alone." Lucien gestured to the shadows near the door. "I've stationed 2 of my personal guard outside. They'll die before they let anyone through." He moved toward her, his expression softening slightly as he looked at his sleeping son. "I need to return to the castle. Calm the court. Make them understand that you saved my heir, not endangered him." Clara shifted the baby. "And if they don't understand?" Lucien's silence was answer enough. "I'll return before dawn," he said finally. "Keep him safe." "Keep yourself safe." He reached out, hesitating, then gently touched his son's cheek. The baby stirred but didn't wake. "The monastery is warded with old magic. Nothing can enter without permission. You'll be secure here." He turned to leave. "Lucien," Clara called. He paused at the doorway. "Why did your queen sing that lullaby?" The vampire's shoulders tensed. She said it was a song of protection, that any child who heard it would be shielded from the darkness. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "I thought it was just a story. But when she was dying, she made me promise that someone would sing it to our son. Every night, No matter what he looked back, his eyes haunted. I didn't know the words. Only she did. And when she died, the protection died with her. Clara finished softly. Until you, Lucian stared at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. A human who shouldn't know that song, shouldn't be able to calm a vampire infant, shouldn't be standing here disrupting everything I thought I knew about your species. He shook his head. I don't believe in fate. But I'm beginning to think my queen's death and your grandmother's lullaby are connected in ways I don't yet understand. He vanished into the storm before Clara could respond. She was alone with the baby in the silent monastery, rain drumming against ancient stone, when the first scream echoed from outside. Then the second guard's scream cut off abruptly. And Clara realized, with ice flooding her veins, that someone had just betrayed them. The monastery door exploded inward, and Commander Varric stepped through the wreckage, flanked by a dozen soldiers. Hello, witch, he smiled. Time to free the prince from your spell. Clara ran. She clutched the baby to her chest and bolted toward the back of the monastery, Varric's laughter echoing behind her like breaking glass. There's nowhere to go, human. His boots thundered on stone. The wards only keep outsiders from entering, not us from moving freely once we're inside. How did they get in? Clara's mind raced as she stumbled through the dark corridor. Lucian said the monastery was protected. Then she understood. Someone had given them permission. Someone who could override Lucian's orders. A traitor, just like the king suspected. She burst into what looked like an old chapel, moonlight streaming through broken stained glass. Her eyes desperately searched for an exit, a hiding place, anything.
There.
A stone alcove near the altar, partially hidden by shadows. Clara dove behind it just as Varric and his soldiers flooded into the chapel. She pressed herself against the cold wall, one hand covering the baby's mouth, praying he wouldn't cry. Spread out, Varric commanded. Find her. And remember, the child must be unharmed. It's only the witch we need to kill. Footsteps scattered in different directions. Clara's heart hammered so loudly, she was certain they could hear it. The baby squirmed in her arms, sensing her fear, his eyes starting to glow brighter. No, please, not now, she begged silently. You know, Varric's voice drifted through the chapel. Closer now. The king thinks you're innocent. A simple human who stumbled into something beyond her understanding, his shadow stretched across the wall near Clara's hiding spot. But I know better. Humans always want something. Power. Immortality.
Gold, he paused.
What did the rebels promise you? Clara bit her lip hard enough to draw blood, forcing herself to stay silent. Nothing to say? Varric chuckled. No matter. You'll tell me everything before you die. I'll make sure of it. The baby's eyes flared crimson, and Clara felt him tense, about to cry. She did the only thing she could think of. She began to hum. The lullaby spilled from her lips, barely audible, more breath than sound. But the effect was immediate. The baby calmed, nestling against her, his eyes dimming to a soft glow. And Varric froze. That song, he whispered, his voice suddenly different, younger, uncertain. I know that song. Clara's humming faltered. My mother sang it. Varric continued, and Clara heard him move closer to her hiding place. Before the queen claimed it as royal property. Before she forbade anyone else from singing it, his voice hardened. My mother died the night the queen made that decree. Died of a broken heart because she could no longer sing the one song that had been in our family for generations. Clara's blood ran cold. This wasn't just about the baby. This was old grief, old rage, finally finding a target. The queen stole that lullaby from common vampires and made it a symbol of her precious bloodline. Varric snarled. And now you, a human, dare to sing it? To claim a connection to royalty that even my mother was denied. He appeared around the alcove, his face twisted with centuries of resentment. You die now. Clara threw herself sideways as Varric's claws raked the air where her head had been. She rolled, came up running, the baby clutched tight against her chest. Take her. Varric roared. Soldiers converged from every direction. Clara dodged one, ducked under another's grasp, her waitress instincts, honed by years of navigating crowded dining rooms, somehow keeping her alive. But there were too many. A female vampire caught Clara's arm, spinning her around. Another grabbed her hair. Clara screamed, twisting, protecting the baby with her body as they dragged her down. "Give us the child," the female vampire hissed, claws digging into Clara's shoulder. "Give him to us, and we'll make your death quick." "Never." Clara kicked out, felt her foot connect with something solid. The grip on her hair loosened. She scrambled toward the altar, looking for anything she could use as a weapon. Her hand closed around a piece of broken wood, part of an old cross, splintered but still sharp. When the next soldier lunged, Clara drove it into his chest. The vampire screamed and collapsed, more from shock than injury. Clara grabbed the baby and ran for a side door she'd spotted, her shoulder bleeding, her lungs burning. Varric appeared in front of her, moving faster than her eyes could follow. His hand wrapped around her throat and lifted her off the ground. Enough games. Clara couldn't breathe. Black spots danced across her vision. The baby wailed in her arms, reaching toward her face, his tiny fingers desperate. "Put her down," Varric said to himself, as if reconsidering. "I want to watch her bleed slowly." He slammed Clara onto the stone floor. Her head cracked against the ground, and warm blood pooled beneath her. The baby tumbled from her arms, crying, helpless. Through the haze of pain, Clara saw Varric approach the infant. Saw him reach down, his face disgusted, ready to.
No, Clara gasped.
She dragged herself forward, leaving a trail of blood across the ancient stones.
"Please.
Don't hurt him." Her blood touched the baby's hand. The infant's eyes exploded with crimson light. A barrier of pure energy erupted from the child's body, a dome of blazing red power that threw every vampire in the chapel backward. Varric crashed into a pillar hard enough to crack stone. Soldiers flew through windows, their screams echoing into the night. Clara stared at the baby through the shimmering barrier, her vision fading. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was the child's desperate face, his tiny hands pressed against the inside of the barrier he'd created, a prison that kept him safe but kept everyone else out. Even her. "I'm sorry," she thought. "I tried." Then the world went black. Outside the monastery, a shadow moved through the storm with the force of a hurricane. Lucien had felt his son's power awaken. And he was coming. The monastery's walls shook when Lucien arrived. He didn't walk through the door. He became the door, his body transforming into a mass of shadows and fury that exploded through stone like it was paper. The ancient building groaned under the weight of his rage, centuries-old foundations cracking. What he saw stopped him cold. His son, surrounded by a barrier of crimson light, screaming with a power that shouldn't exist in one so young. And on the floor, just beyond the barrier's edge, a trail of blood leading to Clara's broken body. Varric staggered to his feet across the chapel, one arm hanging at an unnatural angle. "My king, thank the ancients. The witch attacked us. We had to defend." Lucien's hand closed around Varric's throat before the commander could finish the lie. "My son's barrier," Lucien said softly, his voice colder than a tomb, "only activates in the presence of mortal danger. It is a protection, Varric. A defense against those who wish him harm." He lifted the commander off the ground. "So tell me why my heir felt threatened enough to unleash power that could have killed him." Varric clawed at Lucien's grip, gasping. The human she bewitched. The human is bleeding out on the floor." Lucien's roar shattered the remaining stained glass. "The human who saved my son when you and your precious court were nowhere to be found." He hurled Varric across the chapel. The commander smashed through 2 pillars before hitting the far wall hard enough to leave a crater. The other soldiers tried to run. They didn't make it 3 steps. Lucien moved like death itself, faster than thought, more vicious than any nightmare. The first soldier lost his head before he reached the door. The second found Lucien's claws through her chest. The third managed to scream before shadows wrapped around him and squeezed until bones cracked like kindling. "You came into my sanctuary." Lucien's voice echoed with a power that made the stones themselves tremble. "You attacked those under my protection. You raised weapons against the one person who showed my son mercy." A female vampire, Lady Selene, materialized in the doorway, her eyes wide with calculated fear. "My king, we only sought to." Lucien was in front of her before she could blink. "To what, Selene? Speak carefully. Your next words will determine whether you leave this monastery in pieces." Selene's mask of concern slipped, revealing the contempt beneath. "To save your bloodline from contamination. That human has corrupted your son, made him dependent on mortal flesh." She fed him, warmed him, sang to him. Lucien's eyes blazed. "She did what none of you could do. What none of you even tried to do." He leaned closer, his fangs fully extended. "My son was dying in the rain while you sat in your castle scheming about purity and bloodlines. She was a stranger, and she saved him anyway. She's human." Selene spat. "She doesn't deserve." The backhand sent Selene sprawling. "You don't get to decide what she deserves. I am still your king, and you will obey." Behind him, the baby's barrier flickered. The infant's screams had turned to exhausted sobs, his small body trembling from the effort of maintaining such powerful magic. Lucien turned toward his son, and his rage transformed into something more dangerous, grief. "I'm here," he said softly, approaching the barrier. "Father is here now." But the barrier didn't drop. The baby looked at him with tear-filled eyes and cried harder, his small hands reaching past the barrier, toward Clara's still form. "She's the one he wants," Varric rasped from where he lay broken against the wall. "Not you. A human waitress has stolen your son's heart, and you're too blind to see its dark magic." Lucien's hand shot out, and a spear of shadow impaled Varric through the shoulder, pinning him to the wall. "One more word," Lucien whispered, "and I'll show you what real dark magic looks like." He knelt beside Clara's body, checking for a pulse.
Weak.
Barely there, but alive. "Stubborn mortal," he murmured, seeing the defensive wounds on her arms, the way she'd positioned herself to protect his son even while dying.
"Why?
Why would you do this?" The baby wailed again, and this time Lucien understood. The barrier wasn't keeping everyone out. It was trying to keep Clara safe. His son's immature power had created a sanctuary, but trapped the infant inside it, unable to reach the one person he trusted. "I need you to lower the barrier," Lucien said gently to his son. "Let me help her. Please." The baby hiccuped, confused and terrified. Lucien did something he hadn't done since his queen died.
He sang.
His voice was rough, unpracticed, but he remembered enough of the lullaby, the melody his queen had sung every night. He didn't know all the words, but he hummed the parts he'd forgotten, letting the ancient tune fill the ruined chapel. The barrier flickered. Lucien kept singing, inching closer to Clara, his hands gentle as he lifted her head. Blood matted her hair. Her breathing was shallow. "Stay with us," he commanded. "You don't get to die after everything you've survived." The barrier dropped. The baby crawled across the blood-stained floor and collapsed against Clara's chest, his small body shaking with exhausted sobs. Lucien tore open his wrist with his fangs. "This will heal you," he said, pressing the wound to Clara's lips. "My blood is ancient, powerful. Drink." Clara's unconscious body rejected it at first, but Lucien persisted, massaging her throat until she swallowed reflexively. The change was immediate. Her wounds began to close, skin knitting together. Color returned to her face. But she didn't wake. Behind them, Varric laughed weakly. "You've damned her, my king. Given a human vampire blood. She'll be neither mortal nor immortal now. A half thing, an abomination." Lucien stood, turned, and his eyes promised death. "Then I'll have excellent company," he said quietly, Because any vampire who threatens her again will learn exactly what kind of monster their king can become. He pulled the shadow spear free, and Vera collapsed, gasping. Get out. All of you. Tell the court what happened here. Lucien's voice dropped to a lethal whisper. And tell them that as of this moment, any vampire, noble or common, who harms a human who aids our kind will answer to me personally. Celine helped Varric to his feet, both of them battered and humiliated. This isn't over, Varric hissed as they limped toward the exit. The court will never accept. The court, Lucien interrupted, will accept what I tell them to accept. Or they can join the rebels in death. He turned his back on them, the ultimate dismissal, and knelt beside Clara and his son. The baby had stopped crying. He looked up at his father with exhausted, trusting eyes. And for the first time since the nursery burned, Lucien felt something other than rage.
Hope.
Clara woke to the sound of arguing. Her eyes fluttered open slowly, and she found herself in a massive bed with silk sheets the color of midnight. Candles flickered on ornate stands, casting shadows across walls covered in ancient tapestries. This wasn't the monastery. This was a castle. You cannot be serious, a female voice shrieked. A human, living in the royal wing? Eating at the king's table? It's madness. It's law, Lucien's voice, cold and final. As of this morning, I've decreed new protections for any human who aids vampire kind. Clara saved my son. She will be honored, not hidden away like some shameful secret. Clara tried to sit up and gasped as pain lanced through her skull. The door burst open immediately, and Lucien appeared, the baby vampire in his arms. You're awake, something in his expression softened. How do you feel? Like I got hit by a truck. Clara touched her head, feeling bandages. What happened? The monastery, Varric. Dead, Lucien said it without emotion. He died from his injuries an hour after we returned to the castle. Lady Celine has been exiled to the outer territories. He moved closer, and Clara noticed the baby reaching toward her. You've been unconscious for 2 days. 2 days. Clara struggled to process this. My grandmother, she'll be worried. I sent word to her. Told her you were helping with an important matter and would return soon. Lucien carefully sat on the edge of the bed. I also paid her medical bills. All of them. Including future treatments. Clara stared at him. You didn't have to. Yes, I did. His eyes met hers with unexpected intensity. You nearly died protecting my son. The least I can do is ensure your family is cared for. The baby made an impatient sound and lunged from Lucien's arms toward Clara. She caught him reflexively, wincing at the movement, but couldn't help smiling when the infant nuzzled against her. He hasn't stopped asking for you, Lucien said quietly. Wouldn't eat, wouldn't sleep. Just cried and reached toward the door of your room. He paused. I named him, finally. Adrian. After my father. Adrian, Clara repeated, looking down at the baby. It's perfect. A knock interrupted them. An elderly vampire entered, gray-haired, dignified, his robes marking him as some kind of advisor. My king, the court is assembled. There. Demanding answers. Lucien stood. Then they'll get them, he turned to Clara. Can you walk? I think so, but... Good. Because you're coming with me. 10 minutes later, Clara found herself in the restored Great Hall, standing beside Lucien's throne while what looked like 100 vampires stared at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. She wore a simple gray dress someone had provided, certainly not her stained waitress uniform, and held Adrian in her arms because the baby refused to be separated from her. The murmuring stopped when Lucien raised his hand. 2 weeks ago, he began, his voice carrying through the massive hall, rebels attacked this castle. They destroyed the nursery, killed loyal guards, and kidnapped the crown prince with the intention of ending the royal bloodline. He paused, letting the weight of those words settle. They failed. Not because of vampire strength or noble blood, but because of the compassion of one human woman. He gestured to Clara, and 100 pairs of eyes focused on her with laser intensity. Clara found my son abandoned and dying. She didn't know who he was. Didn't know what he was. She saw only a child in need. Lucien's gaze swept across the assembly. She fed him, warmed him, protected him. And when soldiers came to kill her for her kindness, she nearly died defending him. A pretty story, called out an elderly vampire from the back. But it doesn't change what she is.
Human.
Mortal. Weak. Weak. Lucien's laugh was harsh. She survived an attack that killed 2 of my personal guard. She fought off 6 trained vampire soldiers while wounded. And she triggered my son's protective barrier, something that only activates in the presence of genuine love and sacrifice. Shocked whispers rippled through the crowd. The barrier hasn't manifested in 3 generations, someone breathed. Exactly. Lucien descended from the dais, moving to stand beside Clara. My son recognized in her what too many of us have forgotten, that strength isn't measured in fangs and bloodlines, but in courage and kindness. He turned to face his court fully. As of today, I'm establishing new laws. Any human who aids a vampire in genuine need will be granted protection and honor. Any vampire who harms such a human will face execution. His voice hardened. And Clara, as the one who saved my heir, will be given the title of cradle bearer and appointed as Adrian's official guardian. The hall exploded. You can't be serious. A human, raising the crown prince. This is an abomination. Silence. Lucien's roar shook the chandeliers. My queen died knowing our son would need protection I couldn't provide. She sang him a lullaby of shielding, passed down through generations, a song that somehow found its way to a human grandmother who taught it to her granddaughter. He looked at Clara with something like wonder. I don't believe in coincidence. I believe my queen's last act was guiding Clara to my son. And I will not dishonor that gift. An ancient vampire stepped forward, leaning heavily on a cane. And when the child grows, when he takes the throne, what then? Will we be ruled by a king raised by humans? You'll be ruled by a king who understands mercy, Lucien replied. Who knows that our species' survival depends not on isolating ourselves in pride, but on building bridges. On remembering that we were human once, too. The old vampire studied Clara for a long moment. Then slowly he knelt. The cradle bearer has my respect. One by one, others followed. Not all. At least 20 vampires stormed from the hall in protest. But enough knelt that Clara felt the shift in the room, like a tide turning. Lucien placed a hand on her shoulder. Welcome to the court, Clara. I hope you survive it. Me too, she whispered, holding Adrian closer. The baby cooed and grabbed her finger, his eyes glowing softly, not with fear or defense, but with contentment. And in that moment, surrounded by immortal beings in a castle of shadows, Clara felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt like she belonged. 3 weeks passed like a dream. Clara moved through the castle with Adrian always at her side, learning the rhythms of vampire life. She discovered that many of the younger vampires were curious about her, asking questions about human customs, modern technology, even recipe recommendations. The older nobles kept their distance, but their hostility had cooled to wary observation. And Lucien was changing. She noticed it in small ways first. How he'd pause in doorways to listen when she sang to Adrian. How he'd started taking his evening walks through the castle gardens instead of hiding in the throne room. How he smiled, actually smiled, when Adrian took his first crawling steps toward Clara across the nursery floor. He's getting stronger, Lucien said one evening, watching his son play with wooden blocks Clara had requested from the village. The royal physicians say his growth is accelerating. Whatever you've been doing. I've just been loving him, Clara interrupted softly. That's all. Lucien's expression flickered with something painful. I've been a king for 300 years. A warrior for longer. But I'm only learning now how to be a father. He knelt beside Adrian, offering his hand. The baby grabbed his finger without hesitation, giggling. He used to fear me. Now
He knows you, Clara finished.
You've been here every day, reading to him, playing with him. That's what matters. That morning, Clara had noticed something impossible. Walking through the castle, she'd passed a window and seen green shoots pushing through the courtyard soil, the first growth in the gardens since the queen's death. Now, as sunset approached, she took Adrian outside to see. The courtyard had transformed. Where there had been only dead earth and skeletal trees, now tiny flowers bloomed, white and silver, glowing faintly in the fading light. The fountain in the center, dry for months, suddenly bubbled to life. By the ancients, breathed an elderly servant, staring at the water. The queen's fountain. It only flowed when she was happy. Clara looked down at Adrian in her arms. The baby reached toward the flowers, laughing with pure delight. Lucien emerged from the castle and stopped dead. "The gardens," he whispered. "They're alive." He walked forward as if in a trance, touching leaves that shouldn't exist, staring at blooms that had no right to grow in vampire territory. His fingers trembled as he cupped a silver flower, the same kind his queen had loved. "She used to say that love made things grow," he said hoarsely. "That kindness was stronger than any magic." I thought she was being poetic. He looked at Clara, and his eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "But it's true. You brought life back to this place. Real life. Not just survival, but hope." Adrian squirmed, and Clara set him down carefully on the grass. The baby crawled toward Lucien, grabbed his father's leg, and pulled himself up to standing for the first time. Lucien caught him instinctively, lifting Adrian into his arms. The baby patted his father's face, babbling something that sounded almost like words. "He's trying to talk," Clara said, her heart swelling. "He's trying to say, Papa." Lucien's voice cracked. "I can hear it." A crowd had gathered, servants, guards, even some of the nobles. They watched in silence as their king held his son in a garden brought back from death, tears finally falling down his immortal face. "My queen told me once," Lucien said, loud enough for all to hear, "that our curse wasn't the sunlight or the bloodthirst. Our real curse was forgetting how to feel. How to love." He looked at the assembled vampires. "We've spent centuries building walls, isolating ourselves, calling it strength. But it was just fear. Fear of being hurt. Fear of being human." He turned to Clara, still holding Adrian. "This woman, this mortal who had every reason to fear us, to hate us, showed more courage and compassion than warriors who've lived 1,000 years. She reminded me what my queen tried to teach me. That love isn't weakness. It's the only real power we have." The old vampire, who'd first knelt to Clara, stepped forward. "The gardens bloom again. The fountain flows. These are signs, my king. Signs that the kingdom is healing." "Then let's not stop here." Lucien's voice grew stronger. "Starting today, we open the villages to humans and vampires equally. We establish trade, friendship, cooperation. No more hiding in shadows, sustaining ourselves on fear and blood." He looked down at his son. "Adrian will inherit a kingdom built on compassion, not conquest. And if that makes us weaker in some eyes, so be it. I'd rather rule a kind kingdom than a cruel empire." The crowd erupted in surprised murmurs, but Clara noticed. More were nodding than protesting. As the stars emerged overhead, something else impossible happened. The enchanted glass of the castle, designed to filter sunlight into something vampires could tolerate, began to glow. Not with its usual dim luminescence, but with genuine warmth. Lucien stepped into a beam of the transformed light. And he didn't burn. "The curse," he breathed, staring at his illuminated hand. "It's lifting." Clara understood then. The castle itself was responding to the change in its king's heart. 300 years of darkness, broken by one act of kindness that rippled into thousands more. "Does it hurt?" she asked softly. "No." Lucien turned his face toward the light, eyes closing. "For the first time in centuries, Clara, it doesn't hurt at all." Adrian laughed in his father's arms, reaching toward the light with chubby fingers. Around them, Other vampires cautiously stepped into the glow, gasping as they felt true warmth without pain. Clara watched the king of vampires stand in the light with his son, surrounded by a court learning to hope again, in gardens brought back to life by love. And she realized that she'd saved more than one life that stormy night behind the cafe. She'd saved them all. "Thank you," Lucien said quietly, his eyes meeting hers over Adrian's head. "For everything." Clara smiled, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for letting me." In the distance, the village bells rang, a sound that had been silent during the years of fear and division. Now they chimed in celebration, and for the first time in living memory, both humans and vampires stopped to listen. The dawn of compassion had broken over the kingdom, and it would never be dark again.